Certified Examiner Training. Next section is left and right turns. On your score sheet, you're going to find this on the upper right section, left and right turns. We're going to cover both of them together since they all have the same exact penalties, but there are some slight differences where you land in the lane. First up, the vision penalty. You'll see both left and right turns, of course. If the applicant fails to use best possible vision prior to and during turns while observing for traffic or pedestrians. This is a bit of a catch-all. Typically, you're going to need to look in the correct direction where there could potentially be cross traffic, or if there is a pedestrian. You are not, and this is the oral tradition, you will not see this in the manual, you're not required to check your blind spot for a cyclist unless it's reasonable to do so. For example, they don't expect you to check over into your blind spot for the right turn every time, okay, for when you're turning right. Now, if you've been stopped in traffic for a while and you're in a busy area and you're turning right, it may be something that's necessary, especially if you passed a cyclist on your way up to the light. You're going to need to use your best judgment here on this one, and not necessarily what's safe and best to do, but when you're teaching, but what should be required of an applicant? Was it reasonable for them to turn and look to the right because of conditions when they're turning right, for example? Turn signal. So if the applicant fails to give the correct signal for at least 100 feet, so about 5 car lanes before a turn, unless they're at a stop sign or a red traffic light. What this means is do not score this if a customer approaches a stop sign or red traffic light, stops, then signals their intent prior to proceeding. But what you may see is someone signals just as they're beginning their turn, and you'll definitely score that. They did not signal at least 100 feet before the turn. Next up, the speed penalty. When the applicant approaches or goes into the turn too fast, here's the key phrase, requiring braking and turn. Now, many cars can probably coast through a turn maybe up to 22 miles per hour or so. If you're looking at the speedometer, you'll see that. And watch their feet. As they're taking the turn too fast, do they have to brake as they go through the turn? You're probably going to score this, but I mean, definitely not less than 20 miles per hour that I've ever seen. Cut. So when the applicant cuts a corner, it's going to be a little different for right and left. So on the right turn, when they hit or go over the curb or off the road with one wheel, so a little bit of an example here, you just kind of bump the curb. Or if there's a white fog line and they're going over the edge of the road to make that turn, it's going to be considered a cut turn because you're off the road. The white line marks the edge of the road. When you're over that white line, you're off the road. On the left turn, goes over a marked center line or the center of an unmarked road. So they cut across it too early, dipping into the other side's lane. Got to score that one. Cut. So when is it a violation? Remember, on a left turn, when the more than one tire width over the center line, or in an unmarked road, more than 50% of the car is on the other side of the road. If that happens, the test ends, all scoring stops, return to the school, the most direct route possible. Position. So when the applicant fails to move as far to the right or left as practical before turning, this is when the lanes are not defined, and you'll see this a lot when the road is extremely wide. So practical really means you're trying to prevent other vehicles from passing or squeezing through on the turning side. So for example, on a right turn, if you've left enough room for another car to pass you on the right, you're out of position. On the left side, if you're starting way out in the extreme right portion, there was enough room for a car on the left to squeeze by, you're out of position. You'll want to score this one. And you've already noticed this section has 6 points for the danger potential penalties. There's a lot of danger. And so it does have the highest score, individual error on the test. Now, if there's a barrier, such as a parked car, that precludes them from passing, then you're not going to score this. So for unmarked roads, remember, try to use a visual approximation of where the center line is when making a left turn. Okay. The wide penalty, you see there's 2 wide penalties on this left and right turn section. So there's a 6-point variety and the 3-point. So the 6-point one is when they complete the turn into the improper lane. So if you see the red line here, they turn into that incorrect lane, you're going to score this as wide 6. Okay. Or On a right turn, if the applicant crosses the yellow center line or the center of an unmarked road so that part of the vehicle is partially on the wrong side of the road, watch the illustration here, just kind of dips over that yellow line. Again, temporarily crossing no more than one tire width past that line. Or on a left turn, one wheel is off the road. On left turns, one wheel is off the road. Now the 3-point wide variety is when the applicant turns wide, either partially or entirely leaves the lane, but does complete the turn back into the proper lane. Right, so again, if there's no lane dividers, you're just going to have to use your visual approximation to estimate where the center line is. So on a left turn, they kind of dipped over to the far side and then got back closer to the yellow line. You're going to score the wide 3-point. There wasn't necessarily much danger potential there. It just indicates a lack of skill. On the right turn, it turned over broken white lines, right, and then landed back in their correct lane. So in the previous example, it was danger potential because you're crossing over on the wrong side of the road. There's oncoming traffic there. The lack of skill, the 3-point one, is there's not nearly as much danger on that one because you're crossing over two lanes traveling in the same direction. Down on the next line, the congestion potential error. Late is the first one here. If the applicant is late getting into the turn lane or the proper lane prior to the turn. In many cases, you're going to use this white line as your guide. Did they drive over that white line significantly, not just nicked it with the tire, but hit it pretty significantly? You're going to score this one here, a late arrival to the lane, and there is some danger in that. The stop penalty. So when the applicant stops the vehicle unnecessarily at intersections when turning. This can occur at a controlled or an uncontrolled intersection. The applicant comes up, makes a full stop, and then goes to make their turn. There was no reason for the stop. There's nobody to yield to. All right, you're going to score a stop, STP. And the last one's a bit of a weird one. I don't see it very often. I have seen it perhaps 2 or 3 times in 10 years. When the applicant turns to the center of a lane straddling two marked or unmarked lanes. So the situation is when they straddle lanes going in the same direction, okay, not opposite directions. So it can occur on any road having more than one lane of travel in the same direction. So if they turn and they're riding right over the middle here and they just keep on going for a little bit, lanes. Now, if they keep going for a while, you're getting into lane travel errors. You're going to have to decide how long that takes before they cross into the 4-point lanes 4 penalty. And will they need to signal and check a blind spot as they move out of the center of the two lanes and into the correct, or whichever lane they choose. So, it'd be rare, but yes, could be a 7-point error if they turn into that incorrect lane and then take a while, continue down it for some time. You may also consider scoring the lane travel one as well. That's it for left and right turns. Next up, the uncontrolled intersections.